This is our joke in our school. The two purple people coming together, and that was intercourse.
Wow.
That was it.
That seems very informative.
It was awesome. My teacher was actually a social studies teacher, and we learned more watching Sesame Street and did more in our sleep than we ever did in that class. Like, it was pathetic. Like, it was a waste of my time, and like, I don't even remember learning anything about sex specifically in that class. I think probably most of my information that I ever got in high school was from magazines, like Cosmo Girl, 17, like Pickle Random, like Cosmopolitan. Like, that's where I learned stuff. That's just, I had to go out and get it myself than learning it in school.
Then in high school, we had an abstinence-only policy because our school really, really needed the money. And so we got this flowchart that was all the ways that you would have sex and die. You can have sex, get pregnant, have a miscarriage and die. You can have sex, get an STD and die. You can have sex, have an abortion and die. Yeah, there's pretty much no way to have sex and live. And I was sitting there thinking, like, if that were true, we would have got extinct several hundred thousands of years ago. Like, I don't really trust this education. So somebody in the class below me decided to get together some students to teach comprehensive sex ed in our high school, which I thought was really, really amazing.
6th grade reproductive health, but more like in science class, like egg sperm type stuff, nothing around like this is how people meet and purple people coming together. But it was in 6th grade that I excelled in that area of science when I normally didn't do well in science, and like even got the extra credit questions right. So that started my journey, I think, or my interest in reproductive health. And I think part of that is that it was so taboo, and there was an anonymous question box for that part of science when there wasn't for other things. So it was like, ooh, one kid couldn't attend that part of class, so it was very mysterious. And then 10th grade in high school, I just remember learning about herpes. That's all I remember. Like, you have sex, you'll get herpes. That was it.
When I turned 7, I finally got a real look at the goods when me and a girl from school played "I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours" behind a tree in my backyard. The event was somewhat unspectacular because we didn't fool around or anything, but at least it was a step up from looking at National Geographic and my brother's book of Andrew Wyeth paintings. Just as an aside, that girl went on to play an advanced version of our game in high school with about 45% of the football team.
Like, I'm a really firm believer that, like, you don't just teach kids, like, numbers once. You start it when they're very, very young, and it just becomes a natural part of their lives. Like, you just learn math your whole life through your whole career. And that's why I'm a really firm believer in the fact that sex education should begin in kindergarten and end in, well, it should never end, but as far as high school, so K through 12 is how I think sex education should go. That way things can be reinforced, and you can always meet people at their level because you start at the very beginning.
I agree. I think that it's imperative that the federal government see sexuality and sexual health as a national health concern for young people. So in looking at how we want to develop into a sexually healthy country, or to develop and foster sexually healthy adults, that I think the money has to be there from the federal government for the states to use, or local communities to use however they see fit, or whatever works best for their needs. I think that the federal government absolutely needs to stop funding and providing funding for programs that don't work. And so I think part of the federal government's role is to look at sexuality as like from a national health perspective, but then only fund or mandate that programs and education that's implemented is based on science, and so that there's effective programs in place, and that's the only education that can be funded through the federal government, like that you have to kind of show that it's actually teaching people or having some behavioral outcomes that it's proposing to do.
A lot of the studies that I've read so far is abstinence-only education, is that it does delay it, but it's for a very minimal amount of time.
6 months.
Yeah, I was about to say, some studies have shown 6 months, and other ones that are actually the better of the ones have been said up to 2 years. But after that period of 6 months, or after those 2 years, the rates of STDs, the rates of pregnancy are far higher than those people that receive comprehensive sex education. And I mean, if we want to keep people healthy from the time they're 15 to 16 or 16 to 17, I mean, that's great. But what about when they're 20? What about when they're 25? If they're only postponing it 6 months, what happens when they do become sexually active? Even if it is within a monogamous relationship.
I think like, men are always highly sexualized. Like, it's okay for them to be sexual. Like, it's okay for them to do this. It's like the double standard. And so they think that they have that power over women. I think that they see that women are their own beings and they have their own limits to their body that men should respect. And, like, I don't think, since they're not learning about those limits, like, because what men usually learn is from, like, their dads or from the media. So I think to have that education there will show them, like, hey, there are people too, like, we can't, violence against them is wrong. Like, I don't think they see that as wrong with the way society teaches them things today.
Yeah, along those lines, I don't think it's even men that learn these negative perceptions, but I think it's women as well, and not even just in heterosexual relationships. I really feel as though that we have a culture that's very, very sex negative in a lot of ways. I mean, you can't turn on the television, you can't walk outside without seeing images of bondage, of women being tied up, of women being overpowered. I mean, every time you watch a movie, like, there's so many scenes of rape where it's extremely normalized, and it's not even just women, it's also men. Like, take for example, like 40 Days and 40 Nights, there was a rape scene where a man was tied down to a bed and physically raped by a woman, and it was seen as comical.
In some ways, it's not surprising that people have all of these beliefs and engage in this violent behavior when that's what they're being taught. So the average age of accessing online pornography is 11, but in communities, like local communities, there's schools that will not allow rape crisis services to go give presentations on sexual harassment to students, to teach them what that is or what that looks like or how to prevent that or stop doing that, because it's sexual. Like, so we won't teach about sexual violence and we won't teach about sexual harassment or positive sexuality, but yet this education, I mean, young people, all of us, not even young or old, we all learn things, so it just depends on what we're learning and what the source is. So that's what we're learning from our culture, is that sex is violent, that alcohol can be used to promise you sex either way, blah, blah, blah. So again, no counter message. I think that in terms of, I absolutely believe that sexuality education is part of the cure for sexual violence in society. And I think that when we shame sexuality and sexual health and we make that taboo, so when we don't talk about it and we don't talk about it with young people and that's not part of the dialogue, that it also shames and creates taboo around the abuse of sexuality. And so if a child doesn't have the proper words for their genitals and can't say penis, vulva, vagina, clitoris, whatever, and can't talk about those things with their parents, guardians, whomever, then if somebody is abusing them, it makes it much more difficult because they know that that's taboo, and perpetrators know that too. And so it's very easy then to keep a secret about sexuality when it's set up in our culture that it's very secretive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that would open the doors for better conversations and more open dialogue, that things wouldn't be kept a secret. I think that if we have more communication in places where people can really talk about sexuality, then we could contextualize sex much more than we do now. So one of the big complaints is that we have all these sources in society that it's not contextual, like sex isn't treated with respect and it's not contextualized like in pornography, etc. But we don't ever contextualize it. So we never have discussions with young people about love, emotions, the sexual aspect of the relationship, how all of those things develop within a relationship. Like we compartmentalize things and we only validate certain emotions or certain behaviors. So we don't ever bring it all together and talk about, like, this is what it looks like, or this is how it might unfold. These are some things that might be going on for folks. So if we're not talking to people about that, then yeah, all they get is the billboards of sex, 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 sex everywhere in ways that, like Emily highlighted, aren't always positive and in a lot of cases are really violent. But there's nothing, we don't equip people with any counter message. So there's absolutely no counter message to that that's positive or healthy. And I think that's really unfortunate.